Welcome to another episode of Heroic Hotline. We have a very special guest today. We've got a brand new convert to the Catholic faith and a face that maybe you recognize from as an actor, a young actor. His dad's face you would definitely recognize because he's been in lots of movies. But welcome, Braden. Braden, tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. Yeah. So my name is Braden Sorbo. I am 23 years old. I'm an actor. I'm an author, and I have 2 million social media followers. I just released my second book titled Embrace Masculinity, Lifting Men Up in a World That Pushes Them Down, which is right up the Heroic Hotline's alley. It is essentially a Christian guide to men living in the world today, specifically with the culture that we have kind of grown up in. So it's definitely more relatable to Gen Z, but I tried to make it applicable to everybody from the Gen Z perspective.
That's awesome because we need to have your voices heard, and I worked with youth at risk. I worked in the high school, so I have always had a heart for the youth. And I know a number of years ago I was looking at putting together a young men's study group or guide, or but a lot of young men don't even know what a man is because they're so confused with toxic masculinity and everything, and which it's not. And where we want to talk about authentic masculinity. So what's the basis of your book?
So the basis of the book is that masculinity itself is inherently good, and that society has been pushing away traditional masculine virtues and values for decades in this attempt to essentially stage a coup d'etat on men at large. And so I talk about the fact that there is a divine order in the universe instituted by God that none of us can control or change because we're humans. And the best way to live life is to follow it because historically speaking, it's worked. And so I talk about the benefits of having men who are willing to be men and women who are willing to be women, and how both genders can best fit those roles. And that it's not a matter of, and this is where a lot of people are lost in the world today, is they believe that because women are told to follow, it makes them less valuable than the man. But what the book aims to kind of bring to light, and what I aim to do with my life, with apologetics, with public speaking, and my social media presence, is to teach people that Jesus Christ followed the will of God the Father. That didn't make Jesus less than God. Right? They're equal. The Trinity is one and three and one. Women are called to follow men not because they are worse than men, not because they are less than men, but because there is a divine order in the universe, and everything is better when we follow it. And so a lot of people will quote, Ephesians 5:22, where it says, women submit to your husbands. And everyone goes, well, see, the Bible's misogynistic. And they fail to read Ephesians 5, verses 23 through 25, when it says, men, love your wives as Christ loved the church, sacrificing himself for her. And so I aim to bring back, and a lot of my generation is sort of on board with this, specifically the young men, this idea that traditional values are something that we need to be uplifting and emphasizing in our culture, because without them, I mean, when we have flexible morality, which I would say is what currently runs our culture, everything is subjective. It's this whole idea of the non-denominational mega Baptist, rock concert with a TED talk that, it's subjective. Do whatever you want. As long as you say that you and God are good, everything is good. When we all know that that's seriously not the case. But this flexible morality is leading us astray. And so a lot of people are actively fighting against it. And that's what I aim to do with the book.
Wow, that's awesome. And you are speaking so much truth there. And what's interesting is I can take a movie reference. uh Big Fat Greek Wedding, yeah, the man's the head, the woman's the neck, and turns the head where. So there's an order to it. uh and like my wife and I, we've been married 40 years, and there's a oneness, right? And I know your parents have been married quite a while.
27 years
You're
this January.
sorry, how long?
27 years last January.
That's awesome. And I know that you and you're similar age to my son, the actor, and then your two younger siblings are similar age to my youngest too. So it's just trying to help kids navigate this world as to what God's calling you to as a man, as a woman, and the beauty of that. And that's what gets lost in this interpretation of the world is there's an inherent beauty in masculinity and femininity that gets lost in this culture pull, and we need to rectify it. And I know your family has done a lot of work in trying to do that through media, wholesome pictures, and what's your favorite memory, because you've been acting since you were a young boy, right?
Oh yeah, I've always wanted to be an actor because I grew up on sets. I was homeschooled. And so I remember when I was about 11 years old, I went to my parents and said, "I want to be an actor." And both of them went, "Oh, please no," because they know how terrible Hollywood is. So they said, "This is the last thing we want." And at the same time, could they really be surprised considering they took me with them to film? So my dad signed me up for acting classes, and when I was 14, I got my first role, which was in a movie called Let There Be Light, Christmas movie funded by Sean Hannity. And my dad was directing. And I will always say that I'm very proud of the fact that my parents told me, they said, "Look, we can't give you this role because it's not our money. And so you have to earn it." And so they worked with me for months, learning how to kind of substitute for character motivation and depth and growth, how to properly act, how to portray emotions, how to do all these things. And so after months of working with them, I ended up getting the role. And so that is one thing that they were able to give me as a kid that I don't think a lot of people my age or more in my circumstances would necessarily have. And I'm very grateful for that, to be able to say that I earned it myself. But that was a fantastic movie. My favorite one overall, though, I think has to be this movie called I Feel Fine. It's a pretty heavy drama, deals with suicide, and I just remember so many fond memories. It was the most recent film I worked on. It just came out, and I have so many great memories with the cast and crew filming that, staying up late hours into the night working on this movie where none of us were getting paid. It was like the small independent film. It was a tiny town in Buchanan, West Virginia. There's 3,200 people in the entire city, and so, or the town, or they didn't even have a city. And the only restaurant was, a Buffalo Wild Wings across the street from our hotel. That was pretty much it. And I just remember having so many late nights with these wonderful people working on this film, and getting to see it, going to the premiere and watching it for the first time in theaters with the audience, hearing their reactions to the characters, and watching as the story unfolded. Even though I'd read the script 100 times, seeing it come to life was different than it had ever been before. And that could have just been an age thing because I'm older than I was when I was 14. That was when I first did Let There Be Light. I was 14, 9 years ago. And so, or 8 years ago. And so I look at that and I think that there's this big difference in between when I filmed that versus any of the other projects that I filmed. I mean, I've filmed 11 movies to date, but there was something unique about this one, I think. And so that has to be my favorite. And if people want to watch it, it is streaming. It's on Amazon. You can go support the people. It's like $3 to get the movie. Same with Paramount Plus, I think.
Okay. And I'll be doing that probably later tonight because it sounds very interesting, and it sounds like a topic that needs discussion. Where we there's so much loneliness and people not understanding that God loves them and has an amazing plan for them. And so you might not realize, but here in Canada, uh, euthanasia was legalized the same year as in California. Similar population size. In 2022, I think 852 people were euthanized in California, and we're 14,200 and something in Canada. So we've got to reach people through different mediums as to call them back from that brink of hopelessness. And we're in the Jubilee year of hope, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's and that's where, and when you were talking about the premiere, so I'm the 5 years ago, 4.5 years ago, me and my board said we want to commission the Litany of St. Joseph in song. So never really been done, and start out like 8 to 10 minutes and then 14, and then delays and trying to get the premier concert hall in Calgary. So I understand that growth, but that premier night, holy mackerel, like not because you don't know what you're going to see in a concert, something that you've commissioned that you've never really heard before, right? And 34 minutes later, this thing was incredible. We had a bunch of choirs open up, but just an extremely powerful, moving evening that we're hoping to share here in the near future with the world as well. To just give that off. It's a prayer for Saint Joseph, but for us, Saint Joseph is the epitome of masculinity,
Yeah,
an example of masculinity that the world needs desperately.
I would wholeheartedly agree. In fact, he was one of my potential options for my patron saint. Although I will say I ended up going with a little bit of a lesser known choice. I picked Saint Justin Martyr, who was one of the first who was the first apologist of the church, but he was one of the first martyrs of the church as well. And so he's lesser known for whatever reason. I wish that more people knew about him, but the great work that he did defending the faith and not vehemently, how energetically he supported the doctrines, the church fathers, how enthusiastically he was willing to debate and speak with people is something that I aspire to have. And so St. Joseph was definitely one of my top picks, but I ended up going with St. Justin Martyr. But I absolutely love that. And it's true. There's something so dangerous with playing God, which is exactly what euthanasia does. There was actually an influencer, and I believe his name is Josh Benson, if I'm not mistaken. He but don't quote that. It might not be him. You have to verify it for yourself. His wife made a video celebrating his vasectomy with a whole bunch of inappropriate puns and candies. Like they took the Little Debbie's cream pies, they took Gushers, they took all these candies, and they had inappropriate sex puns. And they're a quote unquote Christian couple online, and they're celebrating a vasectomy. And even the high church Protestants. Now, I was raised non-denominational. I was raised evangelical. And so I'm the only one in my family who's Catholic. But even my Protestant family is going, why are they posting this? Something about this is off. Something seems wrong. And so all of the people in the comments section were likening it to preemptive abortion. They were playing God. They were effectively committing this euthanasia. And ironically, his defense of it only made it worse when he finally addressed one of the comments. He said that he has an autoimmune disease and he doesn't want to pass it down to his kids, which is not an excuse to play God and euthanize, pre-euthanize your future children, for the record, to anyone who might be concerned or curious about what that means for everything. But this is sort of the final fruits of the Reformation that we're seeing, where people are taking morality and they're making it subjective. And if you aren't Christian, then you end up going even farther, like what unfortunately Canada has done with youth, which you said 14,000 people have been
Yeah, we're over
euthanized already.
15,000 in 2023.
It's absolutely horrendous. I mean,
Yeah.
we are effectively telling God, we don't need you, that we can do it without you. We're fine. Don't even worry about it, God. It's like there's that joke. This will be the lighthearted ending of this little rant. But a group of scientists discover how to make life. And so they go to God and they go, okay, God, we figured it out. We can create human life, biologically the exact same as any other regular human, made normally, like through sexual reproduction. So we don't need you anymore. So you can go, do whatever you want, but we don't need you anymore. And God goes, okay, sounds good. One question though, how do you do it? Do you mind showing me? And the scientist goes, sure. And so he says, first you take some dirt, and God goes, hold on a minute, get your own dirt. Right? The joke is that we'll never be able to do anything without God. No matter how much we try, he's always still going to be there. And so when you effectively kill another human being in this idea of altruism, well, I'm doing a good thing because this person was suffering. The Bible doesn't forbid wartime, self-defense, acts of taking someone's life for the protection of others kinds of things. But the Bible does forbid killing someone because they have Down syndrome or are missing a limb, or, there is no justifiable reason, especially from a moral perspective, to take another human life for fun, because it's better. They're happier this way. that is explicitly forbidden. And so until we return to this moral society, until we have the foundwork laid again, where morality is no longer subjective and flexible, but a bedrock, a solid foundation, this is what we will be dealing with. And this is the uphill battle that my generation has been left with, unfortunately. Obviously, the boomer generation, and I don't mean for every single boomer everywhere. People, it always blows my mind that you could say one sentence and everyone goes, so you mean everything, everywhere, all the time, literally? And you go, no, I'm just saying a generalized statement. But the boomer generation, by and large, especially the non-traditional Christians, so Catholic and Orthodox, especially the boomers that are not Catholic and Orthodox, are the reasons that the countries that we live in today are the way that they are. The generations that my parents grew up in have led to and have voted for the politicians that have implemented these policies. The American dream is dead. It's the first chapter of my book, right? A college graduate in 1959 would make $10,000 to $11,000 a year in America. I don't know the Canadian numbers, but I would assume it'd be comparable to a degree. In 2025, $11,000 from 1959 is equivalent to $120,000. The average college graduate salary of a 2024 graduate from last year was $60,000 to $80,000. That's if they got a degree that was good, not to mention the loads of debt that they've just put themselves into to get said degree, but also the fact that they are making 40% to 50% less than the college graduate from 1959. And the prices of everyday living has gone up substantially. And so this American dream of get a job, find a wife, have kids has gone out the window. And forget the get a job part. Finding a wife part is hard enough. There's plenty of people who doom and gloom online all the time, but 10% of my generation is on OnlyFans. And for your viewers who don't know, OnlyFans is an online prostitution website where women could sell themselves scantily clad, doing inappropriate lewd sexual acts for money. 10% of girls my age are on OnlyFans, 1 in 10. I believe the number to be personally higher depending on where you are, but I speak from experience when I can say they are all around. And that right there is the pinnacle of feminism. We told young women you can be anything you want, and 10% of them decided to sell their soul.
Well, and you've said so much there.
I know. I went on a rant.
Well, first off, when you talked about the vasectomy, that's part of my testimony where my wife and I had 3 kids, got a vasectomy because that's what the world said. And even Catholics were telling us 3's enough. Got challenged later as I got more serious about my faith. And then we ended up getting a reversal. And 8 years later, we had 4 and then 5 and then 6 and then 7 and then 8. So it's been quite the journey. But then that's where, how do we take these women, our beloved daughters is the name that the women's group here in Calgary, and our young men that seem like they're skittish to even move forward given some of the online stuff that's happened, and recreate that atmosphere where a young man can meet a young woman and find a good husband slash wife and move forward in a traditional family setting.
It requires an extensive reformation to the current systems, political and socioeconomic. We need to remove dating apps. We need to ban pornography, by and large. People will go, well, that's against free speech. Unfortunately, I don't care. It's pornography. It destroys your soul, corrupts your body, your mind, and prevents you from being able to form actual bonds and relationships with people. And so we need to do that. Those are the biggest steps. Actually, Alvin Goldstein, who was known as the father of American hardcore pornography, he's the reason why porn is so prevalent in the Western culture today, is quoted as saying that we, as in Goldstein and his associates, are overrepresented in pornography because we hate Christ. We think Catholicism sucks. And so they specifically did this because of how much disdain that they have for Christ and his beloved daughters. There is a direct correlation between the feminist movements and the destructions of the nuclear family. We've tricked women into thinking that they are irrelevant and that the only way for them to become relevant is to become a boss babe. They don't actually have to worry about children because that's irrelevant. Marriage and kids is actually a burden. It's not a blessing, when in reality, the opposite is true. We have corporate jobs in America today are majority women. They have basically become daycare for these middle-aged and millennial and Gen Z women as a replacement. So the corporations get the best years of a woman's life. In return, they offer to freeze her eggs so that if she wants to have kids later, she can. So she gets the illusion of choice, that she's making the choice. But what we know is, scientifically speaking, after the age of 35, it becomes substantially harder if you've never had a kid to have another kid. And so the corporations have taken the choice away from women under the guise of empowerment. And so the only way we fix it, and this is for the record, this is not a bash on women. Women are doing what they've been created to do. Unfortunately, the bad people have taken charge, and so they're leading a bad way. Young men overwhelmingly are afraid to talk to women. A guy on TikTok will get, or a guy online in the gym will get filmed looking up. He could be sitting on his phone like this, and he just looks up and looks around the gym, and all of a sudden he's in the background of a TikTok video of a girl wearing scantily clad clothing who says, "Look at this creep staring at me while I work out." And he's flamed online and roasted by 500,000 people who call him a pervert and a creep and all of these things. So guys are afraid to talk to women in the gym. The same happens where girls will tell their horrendous dating stories of men who approach them in bars saying, "Why would you even talk to me?" So men don't approach them in the bars. Well, where else are men supposed to go? Church? It's not like there are many men going to these big non-denominational churches, and we know that that is where women are going more than Catholic and Orthodox churches. And so you have this disconnect between men and women where 18 to 25-year-old men overwhelmingly are afraid to talk to women. There was a study that said that 45% of men aged 18 to 25 have not approached a woman in real life, which is just an insane number to think about. But there is truth. When you hammer into these young men from the moment they get into a school that they don't matter, that they are creeps, that their masculinity is oppressive, that it's toxic, that it's perverted, and until they fix it, they won't get a woman. Then they try to fix it, and all the women judge them. They say, "Be emotional." The man opens up, and then he gets ridiculed for being vulnerable. He's called weak and pathetic. And so we have this unending cycle in society. And the only way that it's going to be broken is for the young men to stand up and lead the way, which is what we're seeing. That's why I say it's not all doom and gloom and, oh, it's not over and we're not screwed. There is, right? To be fair, no other nation has ever returned from this point. Once every nation, historically speaking, has reached the point that we're at for whatever technical time period it is, call it Rome, call it Greece, call it all of the greatest nations of the world, reach this point of sexual degeneracy and deviancy, they have fallen and never recovered. America is different, and it has been different since the founding of its conception. Canada is different in the same sense that they are right above America. They have integrated a lot of Western theology and policy. If Canada and America, specifically the young men in those countries, stand up and take the fight to the people in charge, there is a good chance that we save the West. It's unlikely, but what other choice do we have?
Well, and I did one of the previous ones on Heroic Hotline. I had a discussion on faith and politics and just how, if we stop hiding our faith and start working uh, in unison as a voice, we will make that difference. And I am seeing, because I've been doing men's conferences for 28 years, and we've been trying to drill down and get the younger men there, and we're getting young men showing up at our conferences and empowering them, encouraging them. And that's where we're trying to get small men's groups going, and just any way we can encourage. So just let's go to your conversion. What led you to the Catholic Church? I heard you pick St. Justin Martyr, so I'm guessing you got into some early church fathers in your research. But what led you to join the Catholic Church this past Easter?
So over a year ago, a buddy of mine, a good friend who's a Seventh-day Adventist, went on this whole tirade about the Catholic Church being the church of the Antichrist, and it's the whore of Babylon that's talked about in Revelation, and it's the second beast and all of these different things. And I'd never been challenged to look into it before. But when you make such an absolute statement, and a serious one at that,
Yeah.
you force somebody to either agree with you or disagree with you. There's no more middle ground. The fence has been cut down. And so when he made that statement, I had to do research so that I could agree with him as a Protestant or disagree with him as a Catholic. And in doing my research, once I got to the doctrine of, I started with saintly intercession, and that made total sense to me. Once I realized that the people in heaven are alive, okay, great. They're alive. Revelation talks about the prayers of the righteous being the saints in heaven being offered up to God as bowls of incense, talks about the saints interceding on our behalf, talks about the fact that Jesus says that when a sinner repents, there's more rejoicing over that than 99 righteous. So, okay, people in heaven are alive, aware, praying on our behalf, and they know what's happening on earth, whether or not they're omniscient. Obviously, they're not, because they're not God, but they still have a little bit of information. So great, that makes total sense. In fact, I do this every Sunday on my Twitter, which is just Braden Sorbo, or my X now. I will go into and deep dive a doctrinal thing within the Catholic Church. And so the first one I did was papal infallibility, or at least the authority of the Pope, as well as apostolic succession. Then I did saintly intercession, followed by the Marian doctrine. So that's my most recent one, which I absolutely love. The Rosary is one of my favorite things ever. And so he challenged me on all this. And in doing my research after the saintly intercession, because that was whatever, the church doesn't teach that you need to do that to be saved. That's not an overarching statement of, if you don't pray for intercession, if you don't have a relationship with your patron saint, then you're going to hell. That's not a statement that the church makes. But the church has held to the doctrines of purgatory, Marian dogmas, as well as, the other important things is like, okay, these are real, the unavoidable, And so once I got to the papacy, Peter being the rock, and apostolic succession, followed by the infallible authority to interpret scripture, and then the Eucharist. Everything else it didn't matter what I thought about anything else. It had to be accepted because I'm a fallible human being. If I believe, and I break this down for my Protestant friends when I'm talking to them, if I believe that the church is wrong, that 2,000 years of church history are wrong, I am disagreeing with the apostles and their students and their students. Who am I? How prideful do I have to be to say, all of you got it wrong, but I got it right? Frankly, being Catholic is a humility thing. And that's what drew me to it. And that's what draws so many young men to it. I mean, the Archdiocese of LA had a 34% uptick in catechumens this past Easter. And then the year before,
34%?
34%. And then 2024, they had another 20-30% uptick. Like, people are coming back by and large to Rome, right? I mean, I say I came back even though I was never originally part of it, but it feels like I'm coming home, right? That was the beauty of it. It's like I'd never left, and it was the most wonderful thing. Confession is one of my next doctrines that I'm going to be covering on my X next Sunday, because I do one a week. I absolutely love the sacrament of confession. Nowhere in the Bible are we told, go confess your sins to God. It says confess your sins to one another, but in the context, it was talking to a priest. We receive absolution because Jesus waited. People don't realize how important it was with the doctrine of confession when Jesus waited to resurrect from the dead. That was the first thing he did. That was the first thing he gave to his apostles, was the ability to forgive or retain sins. People don't realize the significance of that. He didn't do it when he was alive. When he was alive, he implemented the Eucharist. He implemented baptism. He implemented marriage. He had all of those doctrines, but he waited until his resurrection to give the power to confess or to receive confession and then forgive sins or retain sins until after he died. And so there's a very deep significance to that a lot of people fail to realize. But specifically, my generation is not taking for granted, which is why I say that the young men who are coming back to the church, because by and large with Catholic and Orthodoxy, there are young men returning, not necessarily young women yet. We will see, because the young men are becoming Catholic. We will see young women following in the next few years. That's my prediction. You can bookmark it and quote me on it in 2028 or 2030. But young men, and we can close with this, is young men seek guidance. They seek order. Right? It's not this idea of, well, I can go do everything on my own. It's, I am capable of doing things, but I can't be responsible for my own salvation, which means I need to humble myself. And so young men are seeking order, and they're seeking that guidance, and they're finding that within the Catholic Church. And because of it, they're going to save the West.
Okay, just one quick follow-up question on that. So now you're how can we as a parish, whichever parish it is, support you? Because in the past we've gone, okay, you're Catholic, here's the keys, call us if you need anything, kind of thing. But like, we had a couple men join our men's group after, like, we've encouraged them to participate more in the ministries. And for them, it was great because they could talk about the excitement of being Catholic, because they didn't have the supports outside of the church to share that excitement because their families weren't Catholic or whatever. So how can we support new Catholics like yourself as a parish?
Well, exactly what you just said, inviting them, including them, incorporating them into the church. That is, I wish more Catholic churches had youth groups or facilitated some way for young people to meet other young people. Because I will say, one thing Protestant churches do very well is those weekly youth groups where they have the little pastor go up and give the speech, and sometimes they'll have pizza, but it's just all people your age. And you get that sense of family, you get that sense of unity. And so the Catholic churches, parishes, would it would behoove them to bring young people together and offer ways for them to connect with each other, because that will facilitate even more so the the humanity, the familiar aspect of it. And so I personally, I've been an extrovert my entire life. I can make friends wherever I go. That's not a problem for me. But a lot of people don't have that same gift, right? A lot of people have different gifts of the spirit. If mine happens to be teaching and whatever extrovertedness relates to, so be it. But my gifts are not the same as everyone else. And so I would love to see more. Ironically, I hate it when the left says it, but I'd love to see more inclusion, more bringing people together, especially the young people. Make us feel welcome. I'm the only person in my parish who takes communion kneeling on the tongue. I'm like the only, maybe there's one other person, at least at the 9 a.m. mass I go to. No one else does. The deacon who teaches the RCIA classes doesn't teach it. They don't even tell you about it. I wish that they incorporated it more, because when people are looking for tradition, they're looking to take communion in the most traditional way possible, which is on the tongue. Now, I do it kneeling because I'm also 6'5", so it's kind of hard for me to tilt my head back and away for the priest to go like that, But there is something about the tradition that is unique about it that young men are craving. And so it's not just, oh, let me just put my hands out and amen. There's
Yeah.
something that these young guys want, and the a lot of parishes, not all, mine specifically, and others that I've been to though, aren't as welcoming. You almost feel judged doing it. And granted, you're not there for anyone else, so it doesn't necessarily matter, but it makes you go, why? Where's the reverence? And so the churches should be returning to this reverence, this idea of this is serious, because it is. If you take it in an unclean state, in a state other than grace, you are drinking condemnation upon yourself, as Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 6, if I'm not mistaken. And so incorporating and including young men is the best way to do that. Give them that order, give them that tradition. And the same for young women. Give them a place to really lean into their femininity.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time today. And if you're in Calgary, St. Francis Xavier Chaplaincy Mass seems like it would be perfect for you. It's geared towards young professionals, and they're all extremely traditional music, hymns. It's a thing of beauty. So you'd love it. And Calgary is one of the famous places to shoot movies as well. So,
I filmed 2 movies there.
oh, did you?
Yes, we just ran out of time. We couldn't go into depth.
Yeah. Next time. There's always
Next
next
time.
time. Because I look
Yes.
forward to talking to you and just watching you grow as a Catholic, as a strong male figure for our next generation. So thank you so much, Braden, for saying yes. Continue to say yes, and I look forward to having future conversations with you. And thank you so much for joining us on Heroic Hotline today.
Thank you. And if I could really quickly, if people want to get my book, Embrace Masculinity, they can go to sorbostudios.com and use my last name, Sorbo. I'll give them 20% off. Thank you.
Okay, I was on the website, so now that I know that, I'll have to get the book. Thank you so much.